Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So here's a bonus deck profile for you guys today. This time it's an updated version of my branded Despia deck. Now the reason why I'm bringing you guys this bonus video is simply because I actually got second place with this build of branded Despia. So it's pretty much similar to what I showcased the first time around. But the first time around was more of like an experimental build. I was just dabbling like other tech cards and seeing what I wanted to go with the most. And after much deliberation, I pretty much figured out the build I really wanted to go with. And I figured I'd show you guys what I got this time around, and yeah, let's get started. Oh, and just to throw this out there, after getting second place, I got my tournament packs, and I actually pulled an Ultimate Rare AA Zeus, so I'm really happy to see that. This card is gorgeous, so yeah, I'm definitely happy I got that. But anyway, let's go and get started. So, like before, my deck is 44 cards. Funny enough with Despia's is that there's actually a lot of builds out there that go past the 40 card mark. I've even seen some 50 card builds, some even 60 card builds, which I still don't even know how that could possibly work, but if it works, right? So, but for me, yeah, I didn't want to go too far off the 40 card mark, so I figured 44 was the best number for me, at least for right now, so who knows. Anyway, starting off with 3 copies of Alibert, Jester, Despia, definitely your main starter. Searches out any branded spell or trap, and also has a really cool graveyard effect where if a fusion monster leaves the field, whether by battle or destroyed by card effects, you can target one effect monster your opponent controls, special summon this card, and of course you can only use one of its effects per turn and only once that turn. 2 Tragedy. Some builds like to go 3, some like to go 2. It really depends on what cards you're playing, really. But I like 2 simply because you can just send it off a branded fusion anyway, and then just kind of trigger its effect. So if it's sent to the grave or banished by a card effect, you can add any Despia monster you want. Also, of course, same clause as Alibert, can only use one effect per turn and only once that turn. But it also has a graveyard effect where you can banish this card and then reset one of your branded spells or traps. So really good for recycling, basically. 1 Dramaturge actually came up a couple times. He's a really sizable body, and plus he actually has a built-in negation, where basically if your opponent special summons an extra deck monster, you can target one effect monster your opponent controls and negate its effect. So yeah, an on-field effect failure basically. 1 Ad Libitum. This basically your monster reborn if used as fusion material. You can special summon back any Despia monster or level 8 or higher fusion monster except itself. So pretty good. Also has a power boost which rarely comes up, but it can if you needed to. 2 copies of Fallen of Albaz. You definitely need at least 2 simply because, yeah, you're going to be running a lot of Albaz fusion monsters, and this is the card that you generally need to use for branded fusion. 2 copies of Incredible Ecclesia. Now, the reason I play this is because my build is primarily going second build, but I have ways to opt to go first if I need to. So, like, she can easily be sided out if I have to go that route, but in general, she's really strong simply because if my opponent goes first, especially if they win the dice roll, I have a means to, force out negations. So I can special summon this card like a Cyber Dragon, and also I can fire off right away to go into Fallen of Albaz, just to force them to, activate something in response. And if they don't, Albaz basically gets the super poly on the field. Cool thing about Ecclesia too is that she also is a light monster, so you can also use her to go into Albion, or you can use her graveyard effect where if a fusion monster leaves the field this turn, on the end phase, she can cycle herself back to your hand. So Ecclesia actually has a lot of utility for this deck, and honestly, it's definitely something you shouldn't sleep on. So Ecclesia, definitely something to try out and go for it, Moving on, 2 copies of Edgem Chain. I am running the Fight for package simply because, this card cycles out another Patchwork, and as a free dark monster, you can just basically fuse off for anything. So yeah, Edgem Chain's pretty good. I cut Light Hex Seal Fusion and decided to go for the 1 Vanilla Dark Magician. And actually comes up quite a lot, going into Dragoon, getting that additional pop is definitely worth it. And yeah, it's just really good at closing out games if you go to the Dragoon, so definitely something to consider. For my hand trap lineup, this may seem a little odd to some people, but it's been working for me. I go 2 of each of my hand traps, 2 Ash Blossom, 2 Bell, 2 Ogre, and last but not least, 2 copies of Valor. And the reason simply is because, I kind of want to balance out my hand trap lineup while also having a nice variety of hand traps. That way I know, like, depending on which matchup, I can easily decide out which ones I don't need and keep in the ones I do need. So again, it definitely comes up when you really need to, but overall, each and every single one of these has seen play. So yeah, I definitely like Ash, Valor, Ogre, and Bell. Bell is just really strong against the mirror match or just any other deck that has graveyard related effects. So, and Ogre right now is just considerably a little bit better because it gets rid of spots, or not spots, but gets rid of cards if they activate an effect, and just to prevent them from triggering off if they're like a continuous spell or a field spell, for example, Flow Under Ease. Which surprisingly, I did not see that matchup at all today or yesterday. All right, moving on to spells already. 3 copies of Branded Fusion. Naturally, it's going to be one of your best cards in the entire deck. It should all fusion. I mean, there's nothing else to really compare it to. 3 copies of Branded Opening. It's a Rhoda / E-Telly, and definitely a good way just to, just to dodge Draw and Lockbird if you activate this during your draw phase. 2 Branded in Red. An amazing card. Cycles back one of your Despias or Fallen of Albaz and perform a fusion summon by banishing materials. 1 field spell, which I actually never saw play at all yesterday, but again, you definitely still want to run at least 1 copy of it in case you do need a backup plan, and yeah, it's a pretty strong card. Next, 3 copies of Fight for Patchwork. This card's literally just Pot of Greed because you get to add 2 cards with little to no cost. You just have to add an Edge monster plus 1 Polymerization, which for this deck, that's pretty beneficial because you do need Polymerization. So yeah, 2 copies of Polymerization. 2 copies of Super Polymerization. I was considering running this at 3, but so far 2 seems to be the right number, so I don't know. You could run this at 3 if you wanted. Next, 3 copies of Triple T, which actually saw play quite a lot yesterday. So first match, my Branded Fusion got ashed, but I went Triple T and I was still able to draw into the cards I needed. And yeah, it really helps out when you really need it to. 1 Called By. 1 Gold Sark is a good starter, as well as Foolish Burial. Gold Sark actually saw some play yesterday too. Unfortunately, on my final matchup, it was going to be the card that was going to save me, but my opponent had Artifact Lancia, and it ultimately just butchered my plan. So, but oh well, that can happen, and just gotta learn how to live with it. All right, so that pretty much rounds up our main deck. Now moving on to the extra deck. Extra deck is pretty self-explanatory. 2 Lebellion. Basically does what Albion does, only this one actually discards for cost. You can just shuffle back fusion materials, and yeah, on the turn you resolve that, you cannot attack with this card, but if you're going first, it really doesn't matter. 2 Albion. Banishes fusion materials to perform another fusion summon. 1 Mirror Jade, which funny enough with Lebellion, you can actually shuffle back your Lebellion and one of your Fallen of Albaz to make this card in. Honestly, you do make that quite a lot, so Mirror Jade is just really good. And it's not technically a hard once per turn. It just says if you use its effects, you can't use it the next turn, but if you get it off the field and revive it somehow, you basically reset the whole cycle. And yeah, Mirror Jade is just such a crazy card. You send an extra deck monster from your extra deck as cost, and you get to banish 1 card or 1 monster your opponent controls. So, and that does not target. Next, 2 copies of Guardian Chimera. Also saw a lot of play yesterday. I mean, Guardian Chimera really comes in clutch. The fact that it lets you draw cards and pop cards, yeah, it's nothing to scoff at. And with Polymerization in your graveyard, it can't be targeted whatsoever. 2 Masquerade. It's easy to turbo out 2 of them, but sometimes, like, if you want to play it safe, because, like, one of my earlier matches, I got Super Poly twice in the same game, so I couldn't really risk, getting out both of them without losing both of them. So, yeah, sometimes, like, it's better just to stick with one and one other form of disruption instead. So, Masquerade, again, comes up. If you know your matchup, then go for both of them. That way you can basically put your opponent on a clock. So, but yeah, Masquerade's just crazy. 1 Despian Quiritus, which actually only saw play once, funny enough, but it actually came in clutch when I really needed it the most. 1 Despian Proskinian, an amazing card. My tech card for this extra deck is Sprin the Iron Dash Dragon. So before I was running Titaniclad, but I decided to cut it and put in this simply because couple reasons. And funny enough, this actually did come up because my opponent, I didn't think he was going to side in this card, but he hit me with Contact C game 3, and funny enough, he was completely taken off guard when I shuffled back his Contact C and my Fallen of Albaz, because this requires just Albaz and 1 effect monster that's special summoned this turn. And thankfully, he gave me a free fusion material. Now, unfortunately, I didn't want to go into Sprint originally, but I kind of had to if I had to play around it. So yeah, this really came up when it really needed to. And it also has a pretty cool effect. You can change its monster zone, kind of like a Mech Knight basically, and just nuke an entire column. So as long as the cards are face up, of course. But yeah, Sprint the Iron Dash Dragon, that's kind of why I'm running it, because it plays around effects like that. So like anything that forces you to like only use something as material, Or if your opponent summons something during your turn, you can just simply like super poly it away, and yeah, Sprint is just powerful. For other super poly targets, 1 Starving Venom, 1 Dragos Despia, and considering you guys saw Dark Magician, Dark Dragoon, of course. So, gotta run it. Alright, so that runs out for the extra deck. For the side deck, 3 copies of Nib, which actually I never had decided in out all once yesterday. And the only reason this was in there was because I was actually expecting at least 1 Prank Hits player, but never saw him, so I did see a Sword Soul player, and I was considering siding this in too, but the card that actually came up the most was Token Collector, and Token Collector came in clutch like twice, so yeah, it was just crazy. 3 Crossout Designators. Did see it, but never actually had to use it, funny enough, and that was actually during the same match where the Contact C hit me, and yeah, just I didn't really have to use it. Double Twin, 1 Harpy's Feather Duster, Ice Dragon's Prison's pretty strong right now, and of course 1 Red Reboot. And yeah, that pretty much runs out the entire side deck, so. But yeah, figured I'd show you guys like why I decided to change it up the way I did and why I like this build so much. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will catch you guys again next time.